Okay, this lecture we're going to cover representative realism, which is a theory of perceptual knowledge. Recall during several lectures where we looked at direct realism, we discovered that direct realism has some severe problems, but all is not lost because there's a replacement theory that can salvage much of our common sense, fortunately. So, given that direct realism can't handle the problem cases, we need to find a better philosophical theory of perception. The theory, though, shouldn't have any of the difficulties that direct realism has. So this alternative theory should, overcome the difficulties. It should have a ready solution to them. Well, recall then that the main problem with direct realism is that, in at least some situations, actually many, the world is not as it appears to be. We are not directly aware of physical objects, even though we have genuine perceptual experiences. So the principle that what we are directly aware of is the physical object has to be false. And there was that four-premise argument that I presented. And if you take Leibniz's law seriously and the claims of direct, then given the core claims of direct realism, it cannot be the case that we directly perceive external mind-independent physical objects. Now, most people would immediately think that this would lead to skepticism, and that's the case only if there's not a viable alternative theory. So, what if then we are not directly aware of physical objects? What are we directly aware of? This is something to think about. What are we directly aware of if it's not physical objects? Because we're aware of something. Well, one way to approach this question is to think about the experiences we have while dreaming, if you remember your dreams. And if you don't remember your dreams, it means you're not getting proper sleep at night. So you should perhaps think about going to bed a little bit earlier, drinking some bedtime tea, maybe not drinking as much alcohol, but that's a discussion for another class. But consider this though, your instructor, Davis, cares. Alright, so think about the experiences we have while dreaming. Well, when we dream, we're aware of something, even though it's not physical objects. It's stuff that appears to be like physical objects, even though it can't be physical objects. When you dream that you're flying through downtown West Lafayette, if there is a downtown, past the Cranert building, that Cranert building in your dream isn't an actual physical object. It's like, okay. So, here's an aside real quick, though. Recall I said, when we dream, we're aware of something. In the last lecture, I said awareness is necessary for having a perceptual experience. If you're perceiving something, then you're necessarily aware of something. So perception is sufficient for awareness, and awareness is necessary for perception. Well, I didn't belabor this point perhaps enough, if at all, but I'm going to belabor it now. You can't be aware without being aware of something. Again, it is not possible for you to be aware but not be aware of something. Awareness always has to have an object. It is not possible for you to be aware but not have an object of awareness. Okay? Which brings me to the side. I have a side business called Awareware. This is a business where we want to raise awareness because we think it's important that people are aware. And we're selling awareness bracelets to raise awareness because people just aren't aware enough these days. So if you're interested in being aware, you should consult me about getting some Awareware where you can raise awareness. Alright, so how do we handle the problem cases? Well, the most reasonable suggestion, for example in dreams, is that we're aware of some mental image. And not just dreams, but the problem cases such as illusions and so on. So we're aware of some mental image that's accompanied by other mental phenomena such as smells, sounds, tastes, and feelings. Well then, we'll say that in dreams, the object of our awareness is something mental. It's a mental object that we're aware of rather than a physical object. And that applies as well to illusions, hallucinations, and perceptual relativity. And hallucinations are an interesting case because they're a lot like dreams, except that they occur when you're awake. So, for example, these pancakes aren't physical or external, but instead they are figments of your uncontrolled imagination. Much like dreams where you don't have conscious voluntary control, except for those perhaps cases where you can do, what's it called, lucid dreaming or whatever. Alright, well, take again also the example of the railroad tracks that are converging. The railroad tracks are obviously parallel, but when I see the tracks, I see two lines that appear to converge. Well, given when this is just a review of the argument, given that I cannot be directly aware of the railroad tracks then, because there's different properties, the object of my awareness has different properties than the actual physical object, it must be the case that you're aware of something mental then. Not just the tracks, but the whole experience is an awareness of something mental. Well, this last claim is rather bold. It's not just the tracks, but the whole experience you have is something where you're directly aware of something mental. Well, why? And this needs some defense, so I'm going to try to motivate this argument. Well, it can't be that part of the experience is physical and part of it is mental. Because the whole experience is what we say is qualitatively uniform. Take a look around you right now. I'm guessing you're in a room somewhere with a computer screen in front of you. Try to pick out the aspects of your field of vision where you're directly aware of sensory ideas or something mental versus the aspects of your field of vision where you're directly aware of something physical. Well, the thing is, it's all, in some sense, qualitative. It's not like the physical stuff glows and the mental stuff is translucent or is opaque. That's what I mean by the qualitative uniformity. You can't really just tell by looking. Well, the presumption is if you're aware directly of something mental in some of these cases, it's a good explanation that it's always something mental that you're aware of. And then take another example. Take the example of walking towards a tower. The tower appears to grow, but as you walk closer, there's no noticeable difference in the quality of your perceptions. Well, this suggests then that what you're directly aware of is something mental all along. Finally, consider one more case. Consider perceiving the food as first sweet and then sour. For example, when you eat your Snickers, you take a bite of a Snickers bar and it's yummy and sweet, and then you lick the salt, and then you take another bite of the Snickers bar and it's gross and salty. Well, it's not like in one case you're directly perceiving the physical object, the Snickers bar, and then in the other case, you're perceiving a mental object. And compare the sensation of taste when eating real candy to the sensation of taste when eating dream candy. Of course, in a dream. It's plausible that just as in the dream case when eating the real candy, what you directly perceive is something mental. So, we've been considering these problem cases, and in these cases, it seems that what we're aware of is something mental when we have perceptual experiences that inaccurately reflect how we assume the world really is. However, I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to propose that this conclusion, that what we directly perceive as something mental in problematic cases, also applies to non-problematic cases. Not just any non-problematic case, but all non-problematic cases. That's right. In any situation in which we are perceiving, what we directly perceive is something mental. Not just during the problem cases, but all the time, right now, this very second, since the day you were born. That's insane, is it not? Well, no, I don't think it is. So, suppose right now that you're looking at a cup on a table. I'm drinking some coffee right now because it's 9 o'clock in the morning, and although I've been up for a little bit, a couple hours, it's just time for a second cup. So think carefully about what it is like to experience the cup visually. All right? Now, couldn't you be having this very same kind of experience in a dream? That is, couldn't a dream seem just as real such that the cup still looked out there even though it wasn't? And in fact, I'm sure all of us at some point have had dreams that just are really, just seem real. You wake up and it seems like this really happened. The emotional residues left over throughout the rest of the day. I had a dream one time that got fired by my boss, and it took me a couple of weeks where I wasn't sure if that really happened or not. Even though I was going to work every day and was still getting a paycheck, it just felt like I'd been fired. So, but we'll focus on something more simpler, just a dream where you have a perception of a cup versus the awakening life when you have a perception of a cup, and try to tell me the difference between the two experiences. Well, take another case. What about a hallucination? Wouldn't a hallucination of a cup be indistinguishable to the person hallucinating from the person who sees a real cup? That's the thing that's scary about a lot of hallucinations. Maybe if you're the type of person that seeks them out and takes certain drugs, it's not. But for people that are having hallucinations that don't want to. One of the scary things about it is it's difficult, if not impossible, for them to tell the difference between the hallucinations in the real world. Why? Well, the best explanation is that in the hallucination it's a sensory idea or a mental object that they're experiencing, but in all experiences, it's a mental object that they experience. Here's another scenario. What if right now there's a mad scientist that's scooped the brain out of your skull and is visually stimulating the brain so that you have, without the possibility of knowing it, the exact same experiences of one who sees a real cup? You're in the Matrix, basically, but you just don't know it because you're getting all the same sensory input as people that have a regular human body who are awake. Now, it's a frightening scenario, but it's also possible. And that could be happening. What if that was happening right now and you didn't even know it? Disturbing, huh? Well, in all of these cases, your experience of the cup is exactly the same as the one you have if there were a real cup in front of you. And in the cases of there being a real cup in front of you, you're not directly aware of any physical object either. So the representative realist will argue. And so we have reasons to believe based on these considerations we've looked at so far. The reasonable suggestion then is that we are not directly aware of any physical objects in any perceptual experience. Is that frightening? Don't give up. I said not directly aware. Not aware, not directly aware of physical objects, okay? Instead, what we're directly aware of is something mental, and we'll call it a sensory idea. Well, here's a question then. Can we perceive external objects? Remember, the key is the word direct. Again, direct. So think about this. Can we perceive external objects? I wish I was in a real classroom right now taking a poll, but I can't do that, so I'm just going to assume that if you paid attention to the last lecture, you might know the answer to this question. Well, let's restate it. If the only thing we can directly perceive are mental sensory ideas, should we give up on the idea of an external world? Okay, take a deep breath. Relax.
Take a nice, slow, easy, deep breath in. Hold it for a few seconds. While exhaling slowly, say to yourself the word release.
Recall the distinction between direct and indirect awareness. Well, we can say that we are indirectly aware of the external, mind-independent physical objects in virtue of being directly aware of sensory ideas. So take the example again of Baby Bob. We remember him from the lecture on the inverted spectrum argument when we were in the unit on the mind-body problem. Well, let's just tweak the story of Baby Bob somewhat. Baby Bob, from birth, had eccentric parents who decided to install a video screen in front of Bob's eyes. And they attached a camera that was attached to the screen was mounted on top of Bob's head. It'd be like a GoPro. So anything the camera picked up got displayed on the Bob's video screen. Well, Bob could see cups, tables, chairs, mom and dad. But Bob saw these things indirectly in virtue of seeing the images on his screen. So he could still get around the world, learn to crawl, walk. He didn't bump into walls or tables. He saw everything just like we saw everything. He just saw them indirectly. Well, according to the theory of representative realism, all of our perception is strongly analogous to Baby Bob's. We indirectly perceive external physical objects in virtue of directly perceiving sensory ideas. So all of us are Baby Bob in some sense. Well, in the next lecture, we'll go into more depth about representative realism. Stay tuned.